This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Mathews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I'm so excited for today's guest. He is a skilled entrepreneur with nearly 4 decades of experience under his belt. He's a 4-time founder with 2 successful exits, has received numerous accolades, including CEO Monthly Magazine's chairperson and top 5 CEO to watch, 23 by CIO Magazine. He is the author of the book Out Focus, founder, chairman, and CEO of Targatek. Welcome, Bill Adams Jr.
Thank you so much.
Bill, great to have you on. Really excited. But first I have to ask a question I ask all of the guests on the podcast.
Sure.
Targatek employs almost 30 individuals. You've been doing this for about 4 decades in your intro. What's the most important lesson you've learned over these 4 decades? I mean, obviously there's more than one, but what's that North Star for you?
Be humble.
Yeah.
Be humble because especially in startup situations, the roadblocks that are presented to you along the way, you never know the roadblock. You think you know the pathway and you have a strategic roadmap built out. But the humility, I've learned that no matter how positive I am that we're going to be very successful, you got to have humility all the way around because these blocks are going to come at you, and the better you're prepared for them, and they don't disappoint you. So if you are always thinking, "Oh, not, we've got it all figured out, nothing will happen," when they happen, you can be very disappointed in yourself and the organization. And I've learned to take the opposite. I know there are things out there that are going to surprise us. Don't panic. Just keep moving forward.
That's really great perspective. Something that I started thinking about lately is taking your humble concept and just letting people know, like, this is part of the process. Like, without this stuff happening, we can't get to the next level. Because I think when you're starting something or as an entrepreneurial company, like you said, stuff's going to happen. So now we kind of have this mantra around here where when it happens, you're like, oh, good. Like, now we can move forward because this is what we were waiting for. So talk a little bit about like the beginning, right? I mean, were you always an entrepreneur? Did you come from the corporate world? Like, what drove you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I was in corporate America. My first position out of my MBA was Johnson & Johnson. And they moved me from Syracuse, New York, where I'm from, to New York City. And I took over every hospital in New York City for their number 1 division called patient care. And that launched me in the corporate career. And I progressed with 3 or 4 Fortune 100 companies until I turned 38. And I found myself literally realizing that in order to get the corner office, you have to be in love with the art of politics. And I was in love with the art of the deal. So at 38 years old, I decided to leave corporate America and hang my first shingle and open my first consulting firm. That was the beginning. And I never looked back. I just continued to build. I've sold a couple. And I find that I have an entrepreneurial spirit and passion that I don't fit in a corporate environment because I'm always looking to challenge myself entrepreneurially. And I've always said, even when I was nearing the end of my career in corporate America, I always said to my associates, if we're good enough to do it for this company, imagine what we can do if we went off on our own. So
Yeah.
I always had that kind of wily eye about the entrepreneurism. Now, where that all stems from, if you'd like to know, my father was an entrepreneur. He was a dry cleaner. Had his own dry cleaning, did very well in the 50s and 60s. And I grew up as watching my father walk into his dry cleaning plant every day, taking his hand and kissing the picture of President Truman, and always saying he's the only guy I work for.
That's hilarious.
So it kind of rubbed off, I think, right?
What's interesting, you say, like the corner office in politics. Sometimes I feel I have blinders on, but to me, it's like I can't believe that there's people out there that want to engage in that for that corner office. And what I've heard in my experience are people that would say, well, being an entrepreneur is scary because you have to go out there and generate your own revenue. And at least if I'm working with this corporate organization, I know it's coming in. But to me, I'm like, it's quite the opposite. I mean, for me now, I have to wait for this corporate organization to pay me. Like that's scarier to me to have that
Sure.
kind of control. And then this other thing you sparked in me, I've been with this organization called EO for many, many years, entrepreneur organization. There's kind of a
Mhm.
running joke that says we are all like extremely unemployable as people. Like we're uh
That's
but
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've always felt like a big outcast, right? Like I'm just like the worst guy that would ever be in a corporate environment. So coming up, watching your father be an entrepreneur, you kind of go through the corporate ladder ranks. Was it a consultant? So you kind of look at that market and said, hey, I either can drive revenue for this company or I could potentially become a consultant and do it myself. So what did that look like? I mean, was it a traditional consultancy that you build, or did you take on a bunch of associates there that you worked with that you would, tell stories with, or what did that look like?
Well, it's interesting. Near the end of my corporate career in the last couple of years, before I had done some things in corporate America that got some press, got some notoriety. And I started to be asked to do speeches. I didn't get paid for them because I worked for a corporation at the time, but they loved it because it gave exposure to what I was doing within the corporation. My last position, I was the director of corporate accounts for a Fortune 100 company. So imagine big corporate accounts, AT&T, IBM. These were the essence of the team that I supported that we did every day. So, there was one, Eli Lilly, they were our accountant. They asked me would I come in and do a keynote speech. I did. I did some more. I've also written a lot of white papers over my career. And when all that became the gel when I was 38 years old, I realized that I didn't fear risk. I mean, I did think under the corporate umbrella, for an example, the ninth building in New York City that fell was the last one that crumbled. That used to be called the Scherst Lehman building. Believe it or not, the company I was with was in the interior furnishings business. It was called Herman Miller. And at the time, I worked with the salesperson, and we were able to get that company to buy 14, at that time was a big number, $14 million worth of furnishings for, I forget how many floors. In essence, it wasn't the whole building, it was the majority of the building. And I did it by being an entrepreneur. I only went to the chief facilities officer, and I made a deal with him that if he were to come on, do this experiment, it was a brand new product line for them, that I would make sure that he got on the covers of magazines and we would proudly present his story. And so that's very entrepreneurial. So my mind always worked on the edges. And as you know, you can only do that so long in corporate America, especially at the apex, at the top echelon. So I just thought to myself, I like the edge. I'm not afraid of risk. And my passion is to build something that came from my ingenuity. That was my passion. And so everything I do, when I do all my consulting, you probably enjoy this. I used to go in, I'd be dealing with a room of 20, 25 executives in a large or maybe mid-sized corporation, sometimes in SMBs. And I used to run a series of vignettes. They were like games, but they were based on game theory. But in essence, it was uncovering, unmasking the organization and leadership problems. That was the reason I built this, if you will, series of vignettes. And one of them was near the beginning as I ran these vignettes. One of them was I threw my wallet on the middle of because we always met around a board table, large table. I'd throw my wallet on the table. And I'd say, all of you have got to make a decision in your lives at some point or another. What's more important to you, your wallet or your ego? Think about that. And I would let them think about it. They would ruminate. I'd say ruminate on that for about 10 minutes. And I'd leave and I'd get a cup of coffee, do what I do. And I'd come back. And it was really interesting. There were some people that almost broke out in sweat trying to make the right choice. There is no right choice. You either are ego driven and think your wallet will follow, or you're there for the paycheck. Which is it? Now, after working with hundreds of leadership teams, there's no question in my mind that the people that really are ego driven are more entrepreneurial spirit, and they generally don't last their whole career in corporate world because they want to leave something behind, an impression, my ego. I think I can do it better. These are things that I search for because when I find them, and it's always about 10, you get that 10-80-10 rule. 10 are really, you can depict as them. 80 kind of sit in the middle, they give you kind of mushy stuff. And then 10% say, absolutely, I'm here. My wallet's the most important thing. So you can always break it up that way. And it used to help me a lot in how to deal with these three segments of leaders. And it made my job easier knowing up front where they were coming from.
Now, with that being said, that's really interesting to me because I look at the world as it's either you're an entrepreneurial run organization or you're not. And what I found for myself personally, like I get along really well with other entrepreneurial run companies because I just don't speak the language of corporate America.
Sure.
Now, have you found that like obviously I'm going to assume it's super helpful that until you're 38 years old climbing the ranks of a corporate organization, but behind you have an Outfocus book and Targo, which we're going to get into. But is that generally like the direction of where you took your entrepreneurial journey, like selling through to corporate organizations, or were you a little bit of both? Or
No, all of you mean my clients. My number
your
one
clients? Yeah.
client, yeah, my client base was always in corporate America. So I knew the animal. I knew how the animal acted, reacted. I knew where the weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses were in leadership teams. I came with all that. I've been doing it for enough years. I became a vice president, 31 years old. So I had 7 years, not in that company, a different company, and then I switched over. But I had years of really watching the leadership dynamics, and I understood, many of the problems that they were facing trying to lead. And of course, nothing better to guide someone in an endeavor than understanding the audience that you're going after.
So deploying into this company, was there many forms of this entrepreneurial venture? Were your clients the corporate organization, or has it always been the same company? Because in your introduction, which is phenomenal, 4-time founder with 2 exits, were you able to exit in your consulting firms, or were these other organizations?
Good question. Sorry, good question. Um, there were 2 consulting firms, and then I built a technology company back in the day called Valley Collaborator, and I offloaded that onto a mid-sized consultancy. So I've been, if you look at my career, very successful. I was bought out by Del Perot Systems, and with that buyout, that was the last buyout. But that buyout, it was actually a roll-up. And actually, I had to go to work for the office of vice chair. So I left the company behind to partners. Actually, there was 2 sides of the business. One still exists in New Jersey. And the partner and I still talk. It's called Brainworks. They're a recruiting firm. but I got them into the very high end recruiting for technology through my consulting firm. And my last exit was a roll up into Perot. Each exit is different. You know, you can have a roll up. I've had an out and out buy. So depending on where you're at in your career, you learn from these experiences. And one thing I've really learned is this: you never know where the buyer is going to come from. You may think you know, but Perot System started out as my partner. For 1 year, I worked with them to get them in companies like DuPont, Merck, Cigna Insurance. And at the end of the year, when I went to renew the license, they said, "Bill, we don't want to renew the license." The long and short of it is, they said, "We want to buy you." I wasn't for sale, but you never know when these things are going to come up. And it was the best move I could make because, to be honest, I got a chance to work with one of the leading organizational consultants in the world, Jim Champy. He was at that time president of the consulting, and he and I had a great relationship. And part of the reason, part of the reason it was a good experience for me. It bolstered my opportunity to work with one of the leaders in the world. He's now written 10 books. He and Michael Hammer were the ones that wrote the book called Reengineering the Corporation. They made business process reengineering popular. And because I worked with him, I got to understand fundamentally where they were coming from, why. And what I did is actually departed from their theory that process was the center of the world. And I created my own, where the theory was assets were the center of the world. And unfortunately, Jim Champy was one of my primary references, and that was in 1998 when I formed Whitespace. And he remained a friend and a matter of fact, in my book, I give him accolades and acknowledgement. So the whole thing is, it's all, when you look at, if you're an entrepreneur and you look at life, you never know when the roadblocks are going to come. You never know when the opportunities are going to come. You can have a great plan, but if you're not agile and you're not flexible and you're not willing to take roadblocks and turn them in, I say lemons, turn them into lemonade. Every time I get a lemon thrown at me, my job is not to handle the lemon. My job is to handle the lemon, how to make the lemonade. So I've always had that kind of opinion about entrepreneurism since I got in it, 38 years old. And I'm more convinced today than ever that adroit, agility, understanding yourself, and being humble in the fact you got a great idea. But remember, it can never see the light of day if you're not able to handle the unforeseen bumps in the road.
And they definitely, those definitely appear like what you were talking about. You never know where, this buyer is going to come from. I think in the entrepreneurial world, it's like you never really know where your problem is going to come from. It just sort of happens. You got to be able to roll with the punches. So, for an entrepreneur who's looking to tap into that market, right? On the consulting side, like my brain goes, your client base must have been very valuable, but it's hard to scale you or buy you, right? Because I mean, if you're a consultant, you're the one kind of driving that. So what was the main value driver, or maybe talk a little bit about how to build that in a consulting company where you're like the guy, and unless you want to go work for that company and kind of repeat that corporate process over again, how do you design it in a way that it's not just all about Bill?
Well, that's like the $64,000 question when you're a consultant, especially when you have a proprietary approach. So I have my own approach. I created it. We went through a patent pending process, et cetera, et cetera. It was distinctly different than the majors out there. So my competition, believe it or not, were the PwCs, Accenture back then. These companies were heavy into consulting. A lot of companies had tried them. Why did they use us? Well, they didn't get what they thought they were going to get. They really kind of got a rehashed version what was already out in the marketplace, and that's not what they were looking to do. So let's say since '98, when I started White Space, I started it on the premise of a program where I departed from BPR, and it's called the Value Component System, and it's an asset-based system. And when I went out into the market, my first client was digital. Digital knew me through my consulting efforts, and I said, "Look, I've got my own." Digital knew me when I was um, the director of alliances for Perot Systems. My job was to take all the technology Perot had and to figure out a way not to change a company, to change an industry. And I found one. And it was a friend of mine. It was at Cigna Insurance. And literally, we were going to figure out how to reduce the processing of claims from $4.25 down to $2.50. Then we were going to package it up, create a new company, and then we were going to sell it to the second and third tier insurance firms so they could give up their backroom operation. So it was a major endeavor, major opportunity. But I learned a lot dealing with Jim Champy and the application of business process reengineering, and came up with my own approach to value component system. And that was the approach that was a differentiator. Now, to the point of cloning yourself, Jim Champy taught me one thing. When you are the thought leader in creating a business or something of that nature in consulting, where it's got a proprietary process, in other words, I am not taking a existing process on the market, lean thinking, whatever you want, Six Sigma. Now I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a black belt in Six Sigma. I'm going to do Six Sigma. You can scale that because you can hire other Six Sigmas. With me, Jim Champy warned me, Bill, you're the only guy that can do what you can do. And therein lied the dilemma. I could not scale my business. I had associates, they had roles, but every client wanted Bill Adams to be the thought leader in the innovation and transformation. So there is, and we experienced that. I tried twice to clone myself, and unfortunately, both times it failed. So there is that limitation, but usually you have to have something unique that only you know intimately because you've invented it. If you're going to go out and copy or take what exists and you're going to apply it and be a better salesman to get it in, or maybe bring some enhancement to it, other than that, if you're the guy and you're the one who created something and you're the one out there and you're going after clients, especially big clients, you're the man or the person, and they want you to be the thought leader.
If you had to do it all over again, like you're making me generate a lot of thoughts around the idea of, you know, just latch onto something where the market's already conditioned, where they're already aware of it. So like, should I go out there and be the best Six Sigma consultant versus coming out with my own way? And I think it's important for entrepreneurs, and maybe you probably have wealth of knowledge on this, just seeing where technology is today and social media, and we're going to get about in talking about Target AI and all these different things. Like, how do you separate yourself from all the noise, especially as a consultant? Introducing something brand new is it's scarier than latching onto something that's already worked. But my common denominator brain is, well, if it's already worked and there's a pool of clientele, that might be a lot easier to penetrate to kick off my business versus having to educate them on something brand new.
Yeah. Well, when I had the value component system in '98, no one ever heard of it. I mean, I was out there, but I will tell you this: we didn't spend one dime on marketing. Once I got into a series of big companies, Compact Digital, AT&T, Lucent. I mean, and it carried its own voice. These people run in circles. They all know each other. So when I sit with a client, the lead in my client, and I say, look, I've got some space for some more business. Do you know of anybody that you may want to introduce me to? It never failed that there was a connection. I also carved out certain niches. For an example, I carved out a niche, which became a niche after I did it, in where I was helping companies that marketed pharmaceutical products online. I actually dealt with the first company, SimStar, who was ever successful at doing that. Um, and he had been running the rope with it for about 8 years. And what was happening now is competitors were coming in all over the place. Everyone wanted a piece of that pharmaceutical market, direct to market campaigning. And but in the end, the CEO won CEO of the Year for pharmaceutical marketing by the pharmaceutical industry, and the company became the company of the year. So, and that's only one example. I do have some accolades underneath me that I was able to take small to mid-sized firms and completely re-engineer, innovate their current business model, and then I would help them transform their asset base to support that model going forward. So that experience got around. The niche got around. I ended up working with, I think, 3 companies in the pharma industry. And I can only take on, as you can imagine, so many clients at
Yeah.
one time. We had clients in different phases. So we offered our product in 3 phases. You had concept development, content development, and execution. You could stop after the first, stop after the second. They were all prepackaged price. It was 100,000, some negotiated. If I gave you 75 cash, would you take 25% of our stock, 25% in stock? At one time, my wife and I, because we built the firms, held stock in 9 S&Bs. Half of them paid off and half of them just didn't. But so we had to be flexible also, right? But they were all prepackaged. And every time we had a client, they wanted me, the founder and the innovator, to be able to go in and work with their team to be able to transform, innovate, and transform the business model.
Well, I really like what you said. Didn't spend a dime in marketing, and went to your network and simply just asked, "Hey, I have capacity. Who can you refer me to?" Essentially, in different terms. I think it's a really important
Correct.
tidbit for entrepreneurial folks or people that are currently in an organization that are wanting to spin off and do something on their own. I mean, a lot of people think you have to pump in all this money into marketing to create this thing, but it's like, go out there and start making it happen, right? And then you can start to invest. But I want to dive in while we have the time into Targa AI. I mean, right now AI is the buzzword. You have way more experience than I do in this world, and you've probably seen just, you know, I mean, when I graduated high school, my cell phone had like the biggest antenna, and my phone bills would get out of control to a couple $1,000s a month because I
Yeah.
was calling my girlfriend from a different state, you know. And then I watch my kids today play Fortnite, and they're speaking through their remote controls with all their friends. And it's just a different world that we live in. And from a technological perspective and AI, talk a little bit about Targa, what you're doing now, what that company is. I also want to talk a little bit about how you're kind of building this company, because I find it very interesting with all the knowledge you have, and how you're approaching it is really fascinating.
Okay. Look, I wrote a book. It's behind me, Focus. And you can find this book on Amazon. And in this book my book was published by Forbes. It's the first of a 3-book series I'm doing. And the reason I bring that up, in there, I discuss all the organization, leadership, and automation changes that have went on over the last decade, but especially since COVID. The world has become a completely different world. If you look at 10 years, we've never seen this kind of change in 10 years since the Industrial Revolution. And in my book, I even talk about the fact that we are in an AI gold rush, similar to the California gold rush. And the rule is actually the first in reaps all the rewards. The first in writes all the rules and reaps all the rewards. Look at Chat GPT. Go down the list.
Hmm.
The ones in first, they're going to model it up. They're going to more than likely be the ones that are going to reap the most rewards early on. And we are still early on. I mean, this transition, I'm telling you, it was really COVID, in my opinion, that got every company to think big about collaboration and AI, how that was going to fit in. So we were building this before COVID. It took us 5 years to build the platform. And the essence of the AI, it's more than AI in our platform. It's a combination of AI, ML. Obviously, we have chatbot technology, and it's how to blend those advanced automation tools on a single platform that is built specifically for the leader. The number one thing that differentiates us from any other SaaS platform out there is all SaaS platforms are built for the masses, and they hope to bubble it up to the leaders. And the leaders still don't use Salesforce. They don't use Monday.com. They leave that to the minions, the workforce, right? So one of the things I realized while I was doing all this consulting since 98 is leaders were more frustrated and often disoriented today than they were 10 years prior. And I'm going, wait a minute. The purpose of technology, the whole story behind technology, is they were going to make the workplace a simple place. It's become more complex than ever. And that is what sparked my interest and the passion, my ego, to see, could I solve this leadership problem? And if so, what would it take? And it took 5 years to get it to market, which it is now. And it is that kind of inspiration in the AI world. You have to start with the germ and the idea. AI is really about algorithms. You don't go and say, oh, you see this is AI. It's not the way it works. It's about how you formulate and utilize algorithms to either predict, right, the future, or help you automate the present, right? And we put both on one platform. We have automated the business process, and we have predictive analytics built into the platform that helps leaders to predict future moves so they can pivot, corrective action. So it's no longer, geez, we're in a bad situation, we're behind, not going to meet our revenue goals. Okay, now let's get everybody together in meetings, we'll decide what to do to pivot. No, we think in the future it's going to be AI driven. Now you need ML because you can't do predictive analytics unless you're learning from it. So it's a combination of AI, ML, and then of course we went to the nth degree, and we've enabled every leader to run their business off of any device in the world, voice activated or by text. This we see as the way of the future. So how are we different? No one has accomplished this feat yet, according to Gartner, who is my guiding light from 2017. And this whole notion that AI is the future is only in its beginning stages. We are still learning what it really means, how we utilize algorithms to learn, to predict. Even on our platform in 25, we're going to be adding a feature which is going to augment decision making. So you can be on an airplane, the problem shows up on your phone, you can get variables, change those variables. The synchronizer will work with predictive analytics. It'll come back and say, if you do these things, you have an 18% chance of meeting your goal. Improve your chances of meeting your goal by 18%. So it's fundamentally AI has got two sides to that coin. And initially, I think there's going to be many, many more good uses of it than bad. But as we all know, there are sinister people out there that got that sinister side to
Oh,
them.
yeah.
And of course, there will be ways they're going to figure out to do bad things with a good tool.
I gotta ask. So, as an entrepreneur, right? I mean, you hear like executive titles and positions, right? You have the CEO, the owner, COO, head of sales, operations, delivery, finance. How much of AI do entrepreneurs need to be thinking about now spinning up a new company? Just like my first company, I'm like, I'm going to run sales until I can find somebody to run sales, right? I knew in my heart of hearts that at some point somebody's going to need to own this seat. Like it just came with the territory of being an entrepreneur. What does
Sure.
AI look like for like the next 5 years as an entrepreneur? Because I guess the overwhelming thing is where do you start? And there's Chat GPT, but where do you
Uh,
go to get this information?
well, it's another good question. I mean, the fact of the matter is, ideas, the seeds of ideas come from. I always get a seed of an idea, and then I look to other universes. I call it universes. So if I'm solving a problem, or if I'm looking at a problem like we did, and it's a leadership problem, and there's no platform built for leaders, believe it or not, they're all built for the masses. We're the first ones that stepped up. I just got off the phone today with a very rich conversation with the director of M&A for EDP. They're all over it. They want a demo. They want to see how they can embed this in their organization. So when I started out with a system architect, myself with a vision, the architect understanding how to convert it into technology. And never, when we started out 5 years ago, did we in our wildest dreams think we'd be this far along in 5 years with the application of AI and ML and other advanced technologies. But we are. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to try to solve a business problem or a technology problem, but you need technology to, but you're not looking to technology to be incorporated, you're probably a horse and buggy competing against a jet plane, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to be thinking about it in a way that seeds, whatever your seed for your idea, that incorporates the capabilities of AI and all the other terms that go with it.
And just to clarify, ML, that stands for machine learning, correct?
Correct. I'm sorry, yes, machine
No, you're
learning.
good.
And
No, you're
machine
good.
learning, yeah, machine learning and AI, they're used together. They mesh it all under AI. But machine learning, if you were to Google it, you'll see that AI sits atop ML. ML is a subset of AI, but they are separate applications, if you will.
Well, what's amazing, I I hate to admit this, but I'm going to. I typically don't watch the news, but I caught it last night briefly, and they were highlighting Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's company. I don't know the details and his involvement, but they were showing that it's underway and it's being developed, and somebody's got it now implanted, and it's taking paralyzed individuals and allowing them to walk. It's allowing them to control phones through their brain. I mean, what we're about to get into is just it's hard for the human brain to process. Um,
Correct.
so excited to see the evolution of Targa and what you guys are able to do. But can you talk about a guy with your success and background? How do you go about starting this company? Like, do you take all your capital from the sale of your company to launch to go all in on this new venture, or you're a guy with 4 decades of experience? How do you start this venture in a way that makes sense for you?
Well, it's very hard to start like we used to in the old days. Not we, but other people. Gates, Jobs. They started on college campuses, went to garages, started their companies in garages, and grew it from there. Can it be done that way? Yeah, but today things move so fast. And by the time you get it out of the garage, two iterations may have been out somewhere else. So you have to be very discreet about these kinds of stories in the past because they were true and it worked. You have to understand you're not only going to have your blood, sweat, and tears in it, but you got to have some capital in order to get it off the ground, right? So in our case, we have raised 2,450,000 as of yesterday. Private investors that see the future, and we are pre-revenue selling our stock at $2.25 per share. Unheard of. I mean, even the VCs that talk to me say that's impossible. There's nobody giving money to pre-revenue companies. Well, when I had it at 10 million for all of 23, I got 18 people, $925,000. Again, it goes against the stream, but and the more I raise it, the better the talent I keep acquiring. So we just raised it on 24 to 12.5 million. Why do I bring this up to answer your question? I took a non-traditional approach to solving a problem, which is leaders are frustrated and disoriented because they're trying to manage organizations with the fragmented, disconnected resources of today. So we're solving that problem. And then all along, I had BC saying, "Oh my God, just this is when Trump was still president, regardless of just giving you a time frame." And at that time, they were like, "Man, just get this thing done. We don't care you don't have revenue. The idea is there, right?" Well, as you probably know, that all shut down with the new administration. Is what it is. And I had to make a lemonade out of lemon. And how I did it, I said, I am going to raise the price from par value. We're a Delaware C Corp, so 0.001 par value. I had my first investor, who was my CFO. I went to her and I said, "I want 50 grand." And she goes, "What do you mean you want 50 grand?" I said, "I'm starting a new company and I want you back in." Now I've known her for 30 years. She's invested. She's a CFO. She's a MBA, CPA. So in her own right, she's retired now and done very well. But it's contrary. I mean, you ask anybody, you raised pre-revenue money during this last 3 years? Yep. And I just raised it to 12 and I just closed my first person at 12.5. So that is the antithesis of what everybody's running around begging for money, their pre-revenue. And, I'm working with my attorney right now. We're actually thinking about giving advice on how to build the model that we've built and be able to raise almost 2.5 million and have our valuation before we get revenue at 12.5 million. Does that make sense? I mean, look, we're in a sweet spot. We are SaaS. We're in the workplace. We're selling it to the leaders.
Yep.
My theory in my book on the first page says the leadership challenge of the 21st century and how leaders contend with the convergence of technology and the human element in building the collaborative organization of tomorrow. That's in the inside flap of my book. And everything we do centers around that. So we have to all the time think about how can we automate what leaders do today that are time wasters.
Well, Bill, I love the fact that you're in this space, and I know I'm going to reach out to you from time to time and check in on you to see how things are going and maybe get the download on what's going on AI. But where can people find you? What's a good way for people to connect with you if they want to inquire about Targa?
Well, I mean, first of all, you can Google me. My pen name from Forbes is Bill Adams Jr. Jr. You can Google me. You will note that you go to our website. You can go to YouTube, Bill Adams Jr. on YouTube. You can go to my LinkedIn, which is really simple, just Bill Adams, or you can go William Adams on LinkedIn and put Targa. So William Adams Targa. My book, it's in Amazon. You can see in my book my contact information. You can reach me through my email. It's really simple, badams@targa.com. Targa, tech, TEK, all one word, .com. That's Bill Adams at targettech.com. Or if you'd like to call me directly, I have people who've read my book and call me directly because my number's in there, 973 714 9228.
That's pretty cool. Bill, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. You've been a pleasure. I've been on several podcasts, and I find this one to be very poignant for the time. And I think your questioning was excellent.
Well, thank you very much. If you learned something today, please share this podcast. But again, thank Bill. I'm going to let you get back to Targa and AI. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.